freaking middle school boy, male friends wanted to see this film, and I told them I was gonna go, and then my dad was like, "What movie are you seeing?" Like 30 minutes before I was leaving, and I was like bedazzled, and he was like, "Is that the movie with the devil?" And I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "You think you should be seeing that movie?" And I was like, "No."
Your dad practiced like psychological warfare.
Oh, yeah, he was real good at it. And then I like called my friends, and I was like, "I can't come see it." They were like, "Why?" It's PG-13, because at this point they already knew I couldn't see R-rated films, and they were like, and I was like, "I know, but it has the devil in it," and they made fun of me forever.
Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
And I'm Casey.
And Casey has to keep it down today.
I'm at an unsecure location, and so I'm gonna have to use my NPR voice, and really get into your ear.
Yeah, it's making me horny. It's weird.
Me too. I'm self-sufficient in that way.
Okay, Casey, I'm going to throw you right into it because I had forgotten. Last week we didn't get to do an intro because of scheduling conflicts and technical difficulties. But a couple weeks ago, we were talking about mission stuff. I mentioned the missions cruise that my wife had gone on in college. But you had a missions trip story that you were pretty excited to share. And so I'm just going to go ahead and make you tell that right now.
Yeah, so I think it was the summer between my junior and senior year. I think it was. My church was big on missions. They supported a lot of missionaries. Some of them were like,
if they're good Christians, they would be, right?
Right.
The gospel.
Well, missions is great because if you are very convicted about missions, you can throw some money at that, and that doesn't require you to do anything, which is pretty cool. It doesn't cost you a Saturday or anything like that. But so they supported like some Americans that were abroad. They also supported some people who were just like ministers and stuff in their local country. And one such family was in Mexico. It was like this old American couple that had gone down there years ago and had worked with local churches or something doing, I don't know what. And then they were really tied in with this Mexican family, and the husband was like the pastor of the church down there. So we planned this big missions trip where we were all gonna go down to Mexico via bus. So we flew from Michigan to El Paso, and then took a bus like 10 hours over the border into a city called Parral, I think is pronounced.
I don't know. No one's going to check your geography.
Well, okay, so our mission was to minister to the Mexican youth through basketball.
Nice.
Yeah. Because if there's one thing that we knew, it was sports. Our school was full of gifted athletes.
Take a bunch of suburban white kids and bring them to a place where where they can do that when they want to from suburbia, and then bring them to a place where that's just what they do probably all the time.
Yeah. We were not good at sports at all. I mean, I started on the high school basketball team from 5th grade all the way through my senior year. And I was 5'6" or less the entire time. And most of the time couldn't run, more than like 30 feet at a time. My jump was non-existent. None of us were any good, and it took everyone to play. So everyone played, or else we didn't get to have a team.
Oh, one of those. Yeah, that's That is how my foster son's sports teams went this past year. It was like, if not their football team was like that, like so few kids are playing. Obviously, COVID had a factor in that. But I'm like, I went to their first game and it was like, I look at their team and then you look across the field at the other team and they have like 4 times as many players, and you're like, oh, they're not going to be able to sub out anybody.
Yeah, that's about how it was. So they were like, "Hey, look, we're going to do 2 things. We are going to we're going to enter you guys, our team here, in a basketball tournament in Paral, and then the rest of the week we're going to be doing basketball camps for like the kids there, and you guys will help teach the camps." Which, sounds fine, right? So the basketball tournament was first. We drive like 10 hours into Mexico watching pirated movies with English subtitles. I remember we watched The Incredible Hulk, like not the Edward Norton one, but the one where Eric Bana fights poodles and schnauzers or something like that. You remember that one?
Yeah, that one was like that was like the first one they made in that first round of like, we're making Marvel movies, right?
Yeah.
That was, I tried to watch that 3 times and I never finished it.
Oh, dude, it's bad.
Yeah.
I think it does have Jennifer Connelly in it, so it can only be so bad, but
I remember I was sick with a stomach bug and I tried to watch that movie and I still couldn't get through it, even though I had nothing to do and I was on the couch and there were no other movies to watch. I just turned it off and was like, I'm just going to sit here in silence. This movie's that bad. And I had zero taste at that point. I wasn't critical of film in any way. And for me to be that bored during a movie meant that it was pretty horrendous.
Yeah, the one that we watched on the bus was definitely filled with a camcorder in somebody's lap at the movie theater, like Super 8 style. It kind of turns every movie into a found footage sort of feel,
Oh, yeah. I could never watch bootlegged movies. I never was able to do it. I hated that like feel of someone like just recording it and now it's so much easier. I used to actually have to smuggle in a camera in the back. Now, like back then, now it's just like people just like hold up their phones and record for 2 hours and it probably comes out like pretty decent quality.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't checked in on pirated movies in a while.
Yeah.
But I bet you're right. So we get to Paral and we stayed at a hotel downtown and stuff, which was it's a nice place. And the first thing is the basketball tournament. So in order for us to get into this tournament and have enough people to play and stuff like that, like everybody had to play. So all of the boys played. Some of the leaders played as well. And I don't know what we thought. I don't know if we honestly thought that like no one played basketball in Mexico, but we get to this tournament and we're playing against like local college teams.
No way.
Dude, it was the biggest. It was so humiliating. Like we got beat by like 80 points. Like the first game. I don't know if we played more than one game. I think we got so blown out in the first game. That was it.
And you got to show them the love of Christ with your humbleness and your meekness and your loss. Exactly. Is that right? Did you try to turn that into a witnessing tool?
Oh, we lost with grace. That's for sure. So the rest of the week is going to be these basketball camps. But
you just watch now? Oh, no, it was tournament one day, and now you're doing basketball camps.
Yeah. But, they're doing these camps like at like just a local park, right? And I think the family there had been like spreading the word among the local kids and stuff. But we were there during like a rainy part of the year. So it rained almost every day. So we spent like a week down there and we only did 1 day worth of basketball camps. It was a lot of ministry in 1 day, but still,
you definitely got your money's worth for what you spent on the trip. Definitely got.
Certainly would not have been better spent like, skipping plane tickets and food and lodging and stuff and just sort of giving that money to the local community. That's lame. Nobody wants to do that. I'm sure
each one of your plane tickets, I'm sure the cost of each one of your plane tickets could have dug at least 3 wells for communities that didn't have clean drinking water.
Like, I hear what you're saying, but like, what would I get out of that?
That's true. And did you take pictures while you were there?
I took a few. Yeah, I
So,
had the wind-up
okay.
camera.
Okay. No, because now that makes sense. I didn't realize you needed the pictures and you showed them to people. Did you, when you got back, did you have like a big, like, we share about our experience in front of the church?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Testimony.
Yeah.
So we we just spent like most of the week just sort of wandering around Parral and like going to these church services at night and stuff. And hey, look, it was a fun trip. I'm not gonna lie, I had a great time,
Yeah.
but we didn't do much ministering. We mostly like shopped and ate street food and just goofed around and whatnot. But we we were staying at this hotel, but like the family, the American couple, the old couple that was there, like wanted to like cook for us and stuff like that. And I mean, it's a whole group of us, like teenagers and everything. They're trying to cook for all of us in their tiny house, and it just wasn't working very well.
Hmm.
Like they just really didn't have the facilities to provide for everyone.
Yeah.
So we ate this old lady's cooking all week, and it was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, like really bad. And
That is such a horrible thing for you to say as an American. You're insulting their culture, and you have no idea. It could have been amazing, and you're unrefined suburban palate, man.
well, look, I think I mean, at the time, maybe I didn't realize it, but I think that's part of what made it so rewarding was just the suffering that
Yes,
went along with it. The suffering's part of the joy that you get at the end,
that's true. It's another jewel in your crown, Casey. That's
Yeah. I ate like bad enchiladas for a week. So how big's that jewel?
pretty big.
So they were really sweet people. And the Mexican family that we worked with while we were there, or that entertained us while we were there, they were great. And they had like cute little kids, and they were just fantastic. I'm sure they were just scratching their heads, like going like, what are we doing? But anyway, so we eat the old lady's cooking all week. It's pretty rough. So we get in the bus at the end of the week and we start driving. So we drive back to El Paso. It's like 11 hours in the bus.
Oof.
And like all the typical things when you leave the country that people tell you, like don't drink the water and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I thought I had done that. But I don't know what happened to me during that trip, but something got in me, some sort of demon.
It was a demon.
It was something bad. That was more the pain and suffering I'm talking about, I guess, than the cooking. It was weeks of suffering.
Yeah.
So we get back to El Paso, and they want to take us to dinner, right? And where's the best place in the world to take a whole group full of starving teenagers? There's an old country buffet there. You guys have those up there?
Yeah. I've been to one. I don't remember where they are, if they're like in New England or if I hit those in Virginia. They weren't exactly on my like premier destination spot list.
Well, that's
so
good.
I didn't make it to them too often, but I feel like I do remember them as a child.
When I was in 6th grade, we thought it was like the greatest place ever.
Country buffet.
But yeah, as you get older, you kind of get disenchanted with buffets, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to a buffet and you're spending less than $15 for that, you're probably not eating at a great buffet.
Right. So we go to Old Country Buffet, whole group, and like, I don't know a lot about the restaurant industry, but I can tell you with certainty that they lost money that night.
Yeah.
Like we wrecked this place. Like,
was there a group rate?
Like I don't know. I hope they charged us enough because, dude, we hit this place hard. And Jesse, who was on Friday Fellowship the other day, he was there. I remember Jesse like going up and getting an entire plate of desserts, putting ice cream on top, and then just like swirling it together with a spoon and eating that like slurry of trash.
That's disgusting, but also something everyone in high school youth group has seen or done.
Yeah, that's standard fare. That's like mixing all the sodas at the fountain.
The suicide, is that what they call them?
Yeah.
That's what everyone called them when I was in high school.
So we go back to the hotel afterwards, and we're all just like taking you probably had to take us in wheelbarrows. We like couldn't walk. We ate so much. And it's getting pretty late. The pool at the hotel's like one of those, the building is laid out like a hollow square, right? So there's a big courtyard in the middle, and then all the rooms are inward facing into the courtyard, open air, right? So you've got like open staircases going up to each level, and then you go all the way to the bottom, pool's there. The pool's closed. They've got all the lights off and stuff, but there's nobody around. So we're like, let's go swimming. So we all change clothes. We hop the fence, and we're hanging out in the pool. And I remember like everybody's down there, like pretty much the whole group. And I remember like we're swimming and having fun and stuff. And I just felt like this twinge in my stomach. And I was like, oh, ow. Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you later,
Yeah.
And I kept swimming. And then it happened again. And this time, like if the first time was like it tapped me on the shoulder, the second time was like it just like gave me a titty twister. Like it was like, oh no, this has to happen now. So like I get to the end of the pool, I climb out, I take off, and I'm kind of on a light jog. I round the corner and I start going up the stairs. I slipped and fell on the stairs. I get back up. I get to the top because we were on the third floor, if I remember right. I run back to the room, and I don't have a key. One of the other kids has a key, and this kid got really sick of everyone else during the trip. So he was really not feeling the whole thing anymore. Very ready to go home. And I'm like, dude, open the door. You got to open the door. You got to open the door. And so he's like slowly like getting the keys out and shuffling through them. I feel like he had like put them on a key ring for some reason. I don't know. He's a strange guy. Anyways, he finally opens the door. I like bolt in. And of course, there's like 4 of us or 5 of us sharing a room because, that's how it was.
Oh, yeah.
I like run into the bathroom, slam the door. I go to like tug my swim trunks down, but they're tied like really tight around my waist because I was like paranoid about jumping in and them like coming out.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
My butt popping out in the pool.
That's a
in front of
regular
girls.
fear. That's you got to make sure that thing's tied tight. You don't want to mess around with that.
That's experience talking. Like I've seen that happen. I've seen some butts.
Yeah.
At youth group activities. But I tugged once, tugged twice, and that was it. Everything, like a week's worth of bad food and jogging and sweating and all, like it all came out at once into my swim trunks, like through the fishnet.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know if I've ever panicked like that. Like I've been in some dangerous situations. I've seen some people get potentially like really hurt, but I don't think anything matches the panic of like crapping your pants in public.
Knowing that people are like right out there, they're going to smell it for sure. That must have smelled horrendous.
Oh, it did. It was terrible. And like what do you do once it's happening? What do?
You
like,
take a shower,
right? Like trying to get my trunks down, but I can't get them off, and so I just like stood with one foot in the toilet. Just the whole thing was a disaster, and yeah, I just like transferred to the shower and spent like 30 minutes just trying to wash the shame off of me. And I come out of the bathroom at the end, and it's like such a tiny room anyways. And I've been in there steaming it for 30 minutes. And I walk out into the room, and Jesse and my buddy Alex and Josh, they're all like, oh my God, what did you do? What did you do? And yeah, that was like the story that defined me for a long time. Maybe until I got married, that was like the defining moment in my life.
That dude, it could have been way worse. You could have like done that hoist up to jump out of the pool and just sprayed down the pool.
Just like land on your gut, like slip, land on your gut, just like like a toothpaste tube.
Oh, dude, there's nothing worse though than that. Like that, it is a panic feeling. Like your whole body starts sweating, your face gets sweat. I'm like, I remember one time. I don't think I shared this story, but it was on our way back from Virginia, going back home to visit family. We would always drive straight through the night. I would I'd get home from work, I'd go to bed, we'd wake up at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So that way we could just like be there by the next morning. And we got like a McDonald's breakfast or whatever. I haven't eaten McDonald's breakfast since this happened. It just went right through.
Impactful.
But when you're driving and you're like, it's 4 in the morning. Not a lot's open. Like you're like looking for those like open 24-hour signs, right? We're just like every one of us. Like it hit me and Jill. It was just like we both felt awful, but it hit me like so much worse. So I'm like, it's like you really start shaking and sweating. You're like, this is. I have to deal with the fact that I might shit my pants in the car right now. Like, and then what do you do? Like, or I have to get out. I got to pull over. But you keep thinking like, I'll just make it to the next one. So finally, we get to a gas station that's open, and I like run to the bathroom and go to pull the door open, and it just doesn't move because someone's in there and occupied, and you're already inside now. Like you're not going to it's not like you're on the highway. You could just pull over in the dark and shit on the side of the road or something. And then have to figure out what to do. Yeah.
You start eyeballing the women's bathroom and thinking like, would anybody know?
Yeah. It's not a crime.
Does it lock?
I mean, I could. It's definitely, I don't think it's a crime, but I'm like,
it maybe pacing. Should be.
Yeah. I'm pacing.
You shouldn't do that to a women's bathroom.
Yeah. And of course I made it. I was fine, but that gives you like an existential panic of like, and everyone's experienced that of like, this is the moment that I might shit my pants publicly. I mean, you had that moment, so congratulations. But
yeah, that was the first instance of like, oh no, something's wrong. Like, I think I'm sick. And dude, like I worked for my parents at that point during the summers, and they had their warehouse like behind our house, but it was maybe like 200 yards back, and there was no bathroom in the warehouse. And I just remember like working out in the warehouse and like 6 times a day having to jog 200 yards up the hill to get to the bathroom and like barely making it every time, but at least it was home.
Oh my God. That's what your punishment though for going on a missions trip. So high school missions trip. It was a rite of passage. High school missions trips were like rites of passage. Name a kid who didn't grow up in like if you grew up in an evangelical church and you didn't go on a missions trip, then you were a rebellious kid that didn't love the Lord. Is what that comes down to.
Right. Yeah. Like it was something that had to be done, if nothing else, just so your parents could get rid of you for a week.
Yeah, and I mean, kids, I definitely was like, I thought I wanted to do it for the right reasons too. I'm like, oh, I really want to be part of this. I think this is a good thing, but I know like a big part of that was just wanting to go on a trip. Like I didn't travel. It was a way to go on a trip, and I even remember having an inner conflict over it, thinking like, I want to do this. It's fun, but it can't just be fun. Like you need to, if it's just fun, then I'm going to feel really guilty, and I need to make sure that, I'm doing all the stuff that I can to make it worth it. And when you could have just, but I was homeschooled. There was no senior trip and I never did a spring break in college or anything like that. So like, that was it for me. Missions trip was my only, and my honeymoon. Those were my only experiences outside the country.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were like that. Yeah. I know my wife, April, she's going to be on the podcast here in a week or so, and she went on a big trip to Nicaragua when she was in high school. And so I know that was like one of the few big things she ever got to do as a kid, and that's how it was for a lot of kids. But I feel like short-term missions in general are usually not great. If you're going in the United States, like I remember some of the kids from church, there was like some bad flooding in the Carolinas or something like that one year. And so they all went to the Carolinas and they helped like clean up some of the wreckage and stuff like that. Like that, that sounds good. Yeah. It's just, it gets weird when you've got a cumulative like 25 grand worth of plane tickets and lodging and travel expenses and stuff like that to take a group of 15 kids to Mexico so they could play basketball for an hour and then, just screw around in the city and pretend that like it's serving the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a pressure on youth pastors to orchestrate missions trips too. I wonder what percentage of youth pastors, like, I know this isn't accomplishing anything in the grand scheme of things, but it's just something I have to do as a youth pastor.
You're talking about just missions trips or like their whole job?
No, just missions trips. I think I think churches expect youth pastors to come up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I answer that seriously. Oh my God. Well, our guest coming up is Jonathan Braylock. Super funny guy. He is on Netflix's The Astronomy Club. If you haven't watched that, watch it. It's an all-black sketch comedy group or troupe. I don't think I was supposed to call it a troupe. It's hilarious. There's a few sketches in there that just had me. I watched it twice through, and there's a couple of sketches that hit me just as hard the second time. So definitely give The Astronomy Club a watch on Netflix and enjoy our conversation with Jonathan Braylock. Hey, everybody. We are back with our guest, Jonathan Braylock. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Yeah.
So, okay. So I caught wind. It's funny because growing up Christian isn't necessarily on everybody's like resume or IMDb page or anything like that. So you like,
I'm not famous enough to have my own wiki yet where it talks about it, but it soon will be after this podcast.
Yeah. Yep. Our only goal is to be famous enough to get our own wiki feet pages. That's the only thing I'm concerned with.
My wife has one.
Good goal. I like it.
But yeah, so I was like, as soon as I heard that it came up in another podcast I was listening to you on, I was like, this is, it's always like, oh, the lights go off and you're like, I definitely need to reach out because it's just fun when you find out people grew up, like it instantly feels like you have something in common. So maybe, why don't you go ahead and just give us a little bit of your background and how you, how you got involved? Is it like, did you grow up in church with family? Was it something a little bit later on or what?
Yeah, no, I definitely grew up in church. So both my parents are Christian. They actually met in a Christian cult, but that's their own story. I'll let them. I don't know too much about.
Can you mention which cult it was?
See, here's the thing. I keep forgetting the name of it, but I recently asked my mom because I never knew, and then she was like, "It was this thing," and I looked it up, and it has its own Wikipedia page, but I have to like search through my mom's text to remember exactly what it was called. But it was like it wasn't like it's not a super famous one, but I think they did like a documentary about it at some point, so it's also not a non-famous one.
It wasn't like the People's Temple, but it was on the radar.
Right, exactly.
How many of the members got murdered?
Yeah, I think none of them died, but a lot of them left. And weirdly knew like two other couples from that. They knew two other couples from that cult that I wound up knowing as well as family friends. And they also, I think they weren't supposed to like have relationships with each other, and they all did. Not they all did, but some of them did.
You could only have relationships with the cult leader. Casey knows a lot about cults. He likes them a lot. So I bet if you just said the general the general area, I bet.
Oh, I'm sure if I dropped the name, then you would know. I just gotta find it. But during this interview, I'll find it and I'll say. But like, but it was kind of strange. I haven't talked about this publicly, and here's the thing: my parents always somehow find every single podcast that I do. So they're, hey, mom and dad, our story is gonna be out there. But essentially, my dad was the one who like took my sister and I to church all the time. And I was born in New York, so we went to a church called Times Square Church. It's in New York City, fairly big church. The founding pastor is David Wilkerson, who wrote the book Cross Switch. What's it called?
Cross the Switchblade. Yeah,
which was a movie as well. Yeah. And I think started like the Teen Challenge, World Teen Challenge, another kind of, anyway, well known in the in evangelical circles.
Yeah.
And so that was a church that I grew up in my whole life. We wound up moving to Jersey, and we still went to that church because it was only like 20 minutes away. And yeah, I mean, like it's interesting. I don't know. It's my entire life, so I'm like trying to figure out where to even begin. But I was very Christian, and I felt like, I've heard other people talk about this, but I felt like, even though ostensibly most of my friends were also Christian, because like 70% of America is supposedly Christian. Like, right. I felt like I was the one who was more Christian than them. And, I'm sure I got some of that from church culture, which is kind of looking at your neighbor and being like, are they doing everything they're supposed to do? Even though at the pulpit, they're like, no, you don't judge your neighbor. But like,
you do.
In practice, that's what everybody's doing.
Oh, yeah. If there's anything we understand, it is judging everybody around us for not being as good as we were. So.
Right.
Sounds like you're a real Sam.
Yeah.
I would never judge outwardly. I would just judge inwardly.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I also, I when I started doing stand-up, I joked about the fact that, like, when I was young, I thought the rapture was going to come before I like was an adult, really. So I never planned to like have much of a life. I was just like, yeah, I mean, by the time I'm 22, we're all going to face the judgment. Because it was kind of put in the church that I think, like, whether they wanted to or not, who knows? I was a kid at the time. I'm just processing it from that POV, but it was very much a lot of focus on the end times and revelations. And when the Left Behind series came out, everyone was like, yeah.
Did you read those?
This is it. I read the first one, and then I was like, okay, this is fine. I watched the Kirk Cameron movie, and I was like, that was a good movie.
Yeah, I think the book. They did like a kids version of all of them too.
That's right.
And
yes.
I was given those, and I think I probably read like 10 pages out of it and gave up. But I did take to the Kirk Cameron. I mean, not that what. Yeah, he did the first one. Yeah, Nicolas Cage was the one years later. Yeah, so I
didn't
to the
see
Kirk
that
Cameron.
one.
Yeah, I missed that one too. I just passed.
Nicolas Cage has really lost me in his later years. I'm just having a hard time with his movies.
Yeah,
I mean, he's gone off the deep end in more ways than one, for sure. But it's funny to what you were just saying, Sam, about like, whenever I hear somebody grew up Christian, I mean, that's how I felt growing up. Like, whenever I felt like some artist that I liked was Christian, like Lauryn Hill, like being a Christian and like having an album where she like kind of like talked about God, I was like, oh, like this is amazing, and and like when I found out Denzel Washington was Christian, I was, like all these people were like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, and I also, because I always wanted to do acting since I was very young. And in the church that I was going to, there was a lot because it was on Broadway. Literally, Times Square Church is in Times Square, so it's literally on Broadway. It is this old theater that used to be a musical theater, center where the last musical that was there before it became a church was Jesus Christ Superstar. And so they talked about that all the time. Like, we took this place from the world and made it, a temple. So, so I also got a lot of testimonies from people who were talking about how, they were actors and then, they felt the calling of God to leave that world. And I was always like, wait, what? That's the world that I'm trying to get into. I'm confused. But I also felt like God was calling me into acting. So it was interesting. I also wound up doing a lot of plays there. So some of my biggest first plays were at church, and it was technically at a Broadway theater. So.
Was it the people who were called out of acting? Was that just because it was such a worldly thing and they felt guilty about it? And then
yeah,
they had to tongue kiss somebody, and so they're like they had to quit the movie,
and say swear words. There were always when you were talking about finding out people were Christian and actors and stuff too. It's like I remember when I found out that I guess like Brad Pitt's brother is like a missionary or something like that. So like I remember when I first heard that, it was this big deal. It was like, oh my God, like, you think it's like this godless thing. Like they're Christian adjacent. Like we should start praying for him. He might get saved. It's like, you probably grew up with this to some degree too. And it is funny. Like to think of everything in terms when you're younger and in it like that, as when everything's in terms of just Christian and non-Christian, like it's a binary. And
exactly, yes.
And getting so pumped when people fit into that box, like it feels like it just knocks down walls and eliminates the gray area of your life.
Did they make a big
you're allowed to? Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like we had that to some extent, but like where they get really excited is if they found out an actor was like a Republican.
Yeah,
like when they found out Jon Voight was a Republican, they're like, Jon Voight, he's the best, and I'm like, who's that? The guy from Anaconda? What?
That's true. A lot of times finding out they're a Republican in Hollywood was just as big of a deal as finding out they were a Christian.
It was real. It was like a real stressful time when Mel Gibson went on that racist rant.
Yeah.
Because everybody's like, God, we really can't afford to lose a team player here.
He made Passion of the Christ, man. Come on.
I know. The one R-rated movie we were allowed to see at Liberty University.
Exactly.
What was your parents, were they like pretty, did they like really groom through the like stuff that you were allowed to watch and listen to and things like that?
So like yes and no. Like I remember not really being allowed to watch the Power Rangers, and like one of the most vivid memories I have as a very young child was like two memories, both connected to the Power Rangers. One was a friend of mine lent me a VHS tape of the Power Rangers for me to watch, and my dad was like, I don't know if you should be watching this. And I don't know if it was more about the violence or more about the like, I think it had, I personally believe it was less to do with it being violent and more to do with being like magic being involved, because they have like talismans that transform them into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And so I remember my dad saying like, I'm not going to tell you can't watch this. Just know that, like, is this what God wants you to do? And my like 4-year-old self was like having a moral dilemma of, should I watch this show that my friend asked me to watch, but I don't know, but will God hate me for it? So I didn't watch it. And then I remember I don't know, who knows how much later this was, but I remember going to a kid's birthday party and everyone was playing, and then like at one point, the mom was like, all right, we're going to watch Power Rangers. And everyone was like, yay. And then I like went up to her and I was like, I'm not allowed to watch it because I'm Christian. And she was like, oh, do you want to just go into Sean's room and play with his toys? And so I was like playing with his toys by myself in this room while I'm hearing the cheers of other children.
That is a
Playing
traumatizing experience.
and then I kind of was like sneaking to go watch, and then every time I heard a doorbell or a knock, I would bolt into the other room because I was riddled with guilt for watching 5 seconds of the Power Rangers.
Dude, did you ever do something like that and then feel so guilty that you confessed to your parents?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know. I probably not, honestly.
I remember like 2 times that I did that. One was we went to somebody's house for like a church small group thing,
Mhm.
and they had a Super Nintendo that they like let the kids play, and we were playing Mortal Kombat, which I was not allowed to play.
Oh yeah,
And so
that was a no-no in my house too.
I had like a tearful confession afterwards, and then I went to this kid
Wow.
Larry's house. I might have told this story before, but they watched MTV, and I was definitely not allowed to watch MTV. Like they watched Celebrity Deathmatch,
Oh
and
yeah,
it was like the Backstreet Boys versus the oh, gosh, what was it? What were the
NSYNC?
girl band that wore the big shoes?
the Spice Girls.
The Spice Girls. I think it was them fighting the Spice Girls.
Dude, that was a show. I mean, everyone watched, even if you weren't supposed to. I had a friend that was like you would do everything you weren't supposed to do when you slept over his house. So I had to telling my parents that I felt like, oh, we like played Grand Theft Auto and like seeing how that was going to go over. My parents never really cared. Like they kind of just gave us that pass when we were somewhere else. We were also a little bit older, but it still was like we had to let them. I had to let them know. I was more the one to confess about stuff like that. My brother never would have, but Grand Theft Auto, I remember being the scary one because that was the game no one was allowed.
Right.
Garbage in, garbage out.
John, when did you start? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I just had another memory of I think in 7th grade, all my friends went to see Bedazzled with Elizabeth Hurley, who plays the devil, and Brendan Fraser. I don't know if you remember this movie.
I forgot about that movie. I remember seeing trailer for it when I went to, I remember going to another movie and seeing a trailer for it and thinking that looked funny and wanted to see it, but I didn't tell my parents that I wanted to see it because I knew they would have thought knew that would have been a conversation.
Elizabeth Hurley looked good in that movie too. She looked great.
Probably
I'm sure the only reason why all my 7th freaking middle school boy male friends wanted to see this film, and I told them I was gonna go, and then my dad was like, "What movie are you seeing?" Like 30 minutes before I was leaving, and I was like, Bedazzled, and he was like, "Is that the movie with the devil?" And I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "You think you should be seeing that movie?" And I was like, "No."
Your dad practiced like psychological warfare.
Oh, yeah, he was real good at it. And then I like called my friends, and I was like, "I can't come see it." They were like, "Why? It's PG-13," because at this point they already knew I couldn't see R-rated films, and they were like, and I was like, "I know, but it has the devil in it," and they made fun of me forever.
You didn't end up going, is what happened?
Didn't go. Guess what? Have never seen that movie.
Oh man.
I also never saw Bruce Almighty. Same reason.
Oh, interesting.
That was a good one too.
I got a pass on that one. I think that was
like, my aunt. God is in it. It's good for God. Yeah,
I know.
My church was like mocking God. How could God be a black man? No, I'm just kidding. They didn't say that, but some people thought it. Some people thought it.
Yeah, I know for a fact some people thought it. I didn't want to be the one to bring it up. No. So you knew you wanted to do acting, but you didn't feel like you wanted to drift into comedy at that point? Was comedy a later thing where you felt?
I loved comedy, but I didn't like. I guess I didn't necessarily think I could do it, or I didn't know what to me, comedy was stand up, and I was like too scared to do stand up when I was like in high school or even beginning of college, I was like,
It's
oh, I respect stand up, but I can't do that. That's felt scary.
I feel like that first
super
time out
scary.
would be the most. I can't. The first time doing it sounds like an absolutely terrifying experience.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the first time doing stand up. I remember it vividly. I'm sure it's because it is a slight trauma.
Casey's given it a shot. It hasn't gone super well.
I've done it a few times, and no, didn't go well. I think 4 times I've done it, and after the 4th one, I was like, maybe this just isn't for me. Too old to be getting this kind of ego beating.
Yeah, man, it's relentless. You really just have to be okay with just people staring at you and not laughing at things you're saying to explicitly make people laugh. You're like, I expect people to laugh, and no one is laughing.
Yeah, I know.
And everyone's looking at me like, that guy is not funny.
Yeah, that's it's hard enough to talk in front of people when they're just deadpan and you're trying to get a reaction to even just gauge that they're paying any attention. Never mind the purpose being to solicit laughs and just getting just terrifying stare downs. Oh my god.
I don't think people like understand how tough it is to like come up with jokes in that fashion, because like when you're if you decide you're going to do that, you spend days thinking about like this thought that you think is funny, and by the time you get there, you don't think it's funny anymore. Like you're so sick of thinking about it, and then you go up there and say it and nobody laughs, and like you're like, oh well, I guess I give up on that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you're saying you didn't really get into like try stand up or get into comedy till college then, after college?
Yeah, basically I got into comedy because my friend Rami and I, who is now famous, we along with my friend Kyle, we like just wanted to make stuff. We had all gone to the same high school, and we were all like itching to create things, and I just kind of started watching these 2 guys who were going to NYU with me. They were a little older. They had a sketch group called Britannic, which is a fairly popular sketch group on YouTube. And those guys wind up writing for SNL and It's Always Sunny and a bunch of stuff. But like they were making these funny videos, and I was like, oh, this looks fun and easy to do. We could just like make funny videos and put them online. And so that's what we started doing. And then I realized that sketch was an entire world. And so I, kind of started doing research, and it was like, oh, right, this thing called UCB that I've heard people talk about. Like, let me go check it out. And then we were like, oh, I think the first show I saw, Jenny Slate, it was like Jenny Slate's one woman show. And then she was on SNL like literally that fall. And I was like, okay,
wow.
And we saw like other people, like we would like go and see improv at UCB, and then like all of a sudden those people would pop up in commercials and things like that. And I was like, oh, it looks like this is a path,
Yeah.
There's no real paths in the entertainment industry. So like anytime you see anything that remotely looks like something you could follow, at least that's how I saw it. I was like, oh, this. And then I realized there was so much freedom in comedy and being able to express myself, and not having to wait for other people to say yes for me to act. I could write my own stuff and then do it. And then, and I, like I said, I'd always loved comedy, and like, I guess like my comedy training was like recapping Simpsons episodes for my friends and just like literally telling them every single joke that I saw the night before. I remember once my friend Mark was like, dude, I saw that episode you were talking about. I was like, oh yeah, it's hilarious, right? He was like, honestly, no, it was funnier when you said it. And it wasn't. I watched it and I was like, this isn't that funny. But John was so excited when he said it. I thought it was great. And I was like, oh, so, that gave me a little boost of confidence that I could at least do comedic timing somewhat, or, but yeah.
I listen to like so many podcasts with comedians, and I keep hearing them talk about how like New York is in like a comedy boom right now. Is that been your experience?
Now? In the pandemic?
Well, Yeah, maybe not pandemic, but like maybe leading up to the pandemic. It sounded like there was just a bunch of people that were really, really good that were regulars in New York.
I think maybe what they're talking about. There's a lot of people who are like getting their own shows, and like there are a lot of people who are like getting put on that were grinding in the comedy scene for honestly some of them not that long.
Yeah.
Some of them I'm like, hey, you only been doing this for 3 years. How'd you get your own television show? But no, like a lot of very funny people who are getting jobs, and there's a content boom that's been happening, for like 7-8 years now, and it just keeps. The pandemic made it even bigger. It was like at first I was like, oh, the bubble's gonna burst soon, and then it was like, no, because everyone's gonna watch all the content that there is, and then be like, we need more. So here we go again. And there's more streaming services now than ever. So yeah, I guess in that sense, that's true. It'll be interesting to see what the like live comedy scene is like, because there's going to be there has to be a rebirth. Some theaters closed, and theater is just slowly opening up now, I guess. Like, but yeah, it'll be interesting because like nobody really could do live shows for like, unless it was like outside and somewhere or on Zoom or Instagram Live or Twitch or something. But
that sounds awful.
Did
awful
you
to do?
I agree.
Did you continue to go to church and stuff like after moving out from your parents and while you were like doing comedy?
Oh,
Was that
yeah.
still a thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, up until, I guess, like, I'm trying to think. So for a long time, all throughout college, I refused to swear in anything that I did. So I didn't swear in college at all. And so there were several
Me
times
too.
where I got into spats with professors, acting teachers who assigned me scenes that like had cursing in it, and I was like, I can't do this. And for the most part, it was fine. The weirdest thing was like my senior year. There was this like outside director that they brought in, and like literally there was one swear word in it, like that I didn't want to say. And at first he was like, "That's fine," and then like a week later, like called me into his office like by myself and like laid into me about how I was disrespecting theater and the playwright for like not using the playwright's words.
Wow.
And and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like I've already had this conversation with like, the dean of our whatever, year or students, whatever. I remember the title. And they were just like, okay, like, yeah, I've talked to them too. And so you're going to be able to do it. Just know that like, I think what you're doing is morally wrong. It's offensive to me. I was like, cool, dude.
Wow.
And like at that point, I was like, I kind of was like, I had enough. I was old enough to be like, what this person is doing right now is utterly insane. And like, even if they're right, like in a macro sense of like, it shouldn't matter and blah, blah, blah. Like just on a personal level, like you're a teacher, man. Like who are you to tell some kid what they're, like to go against their personal beliefs and then try to guilt them into, I don't know. It just felt, so one of the things that's funny to me is like, as I've deconstructed my own faith, I've also been looking at like other belief systems, it doesn't even have to be religious, just political belief systems or other lifestyles that people live by, and seeing the same kind of things that I didn't like about Christian culture in those places too, and realizing, oh, that's humans. Humans are so like we like things our way, and when like our identities are threatened in some way, we just like we can't stand it, and you see it like Christianity has a lot of power structures that make it a little bit more can make it more what am I trying to say, like it could hurt more, it could hurt people a lot more because of it, and it's deeper, but like it's the same thing. And if you're some political ideology or other religions, or even things like like in whatever new age spirituality or all this, I always find certain hypocrisies or like judgments. I don't know. And when I see that, I don't know if it's the comedian in me, but I just like, I see the connections and I'm like, oh, that's so funny. We're like kind of like all going through the same thing. Even when we think we're not, like it. Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
it's like a dominance thing too that people do. Like,
Yeah.
and you see it all over the place. Like if you golf with a group of guys, there's always that one guy that like is going to get mad at you for like picking your ball up instead of hitting it into the hole. Like when you're right next to it, it's like, come on, man, you got to respect the game. Like there's like a dominance play in being like a purist at whatever you're talking about.
Right.
And those people drive me insane.
Right.
It's funny. We talk about that a good bit, what you were just saying, because it's what we've seen too, is like people who have like, some people just like fizzled out and they just stopped taking a lot of things seriously, and they're pretty well adjusted people. But what the people that you can see who go from like Christian to like this like alternate shift of being on like a polar opposite and taking the extreme and being like, if you think this, say this, believe this, you should just unfriend me now and save me the time because I'm not going to fucking talk to you again. And you're like, that we invented that. Like not even that bad. It's like, it wasn't even that bad. Is like, at least they'd still associate with the world. They just feel pity on it. And now it's like the other extreme is just like, we can't have any association with you because you're a plague and it's going to hurt our image.
Yeah.
Our move.
Yeah. I mean, and that it's so funny because I've always been somebody who like, I like questioning things. I like arguing. I like debating. I don't do it. I do it in a different way now. Hopefully a healthier way, but like, I've always been somewhat of a skeptic, for instance. The thing that kept me in Christianity was finding there were like all of these smaller kind of arguments that people were having that I was like pointing out the hypocrisy in their way of thinking without fully looking at it in Christian, culture. But some like things like people would always say like, oh, religion is the cause of all world problems. And it was like, I was like, what? Like that is so utterly false and like provably false. You know what I mean? Like, but people would just like, they say these things and so it was like that kind of stuff. And like, I got into apologetics at one point, which I don't know if you guys ever went down those rabbit holes.
Is you boys with Lee Strobel? Did you read Lee Strobel books?
Lee Strobel. Yeah. I a little bit. I was more like, like, I mean, C.S. Lewis was obviously like what I first started with. And then there's this guy, Ravi Zacharias, who had like a podcast and like he had a couple books that I went down. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of that stuff. I in high school, I remember we were learning about evolution and I was like asking my dad all these questions because I was like, dude, this doesn't make any sense. Where do the dinosaurs come into the Bible, dude? And I don't, like, we gotta figure this out because dinosaurs are real. Like, you're not gonna tell me that they're not. And my dad, I remember, got me this book, a VHS tape about creationism, and I watched the video, and there was like some interesting, it's just surface level points that these people were making, and I was like about how like water can disrupt the accuracy of carbon dating and there was a worldwide flood and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Obviously when you do more research outside of that, you'll see that carbon dating isn't the only way that we know how old the earth is and how old like different periods are. But at the time it made sense to me. And I somehow was able to convince one of my high school science teachers to watch this video, like play this video in the class, because I argued with them about how it was actually against separation of church and state if they didn't play this to give an alternate theory on how
we would have been hard into that.
Yeah. I was homeschooled, but if I was in your public high school, we definitely would have been best friends.
You would have full on God's Not Dead
just
on
as
him.
hard. That's
yes.
hilarious.
Oh yes. 100% God's Not Dead. I was so mad when I watched God's Not Dead because I was like, get better arguments to this kid, man. Oh, Kevin Sorbo's character is so weak. I can't believe he dies at the end of that movie. That movie is that I was like, when I watched that film, I was like, dude, did the Christian who wrote this hate non-Christians? It feels like they hate them. Like, it was like, you wanted this atheist to die?
Yeah, just the biggest prick in the world.
It couldn't just be like he gets saved. No, he has to get saved while dying.
Well, that's like always the play is like, well, you can subscribe to all of this stuff while things are going well, but the minute you're on your deathbed, you're gonna
right.
Deathbed Christian, kind of a Ted Bundy type story.
You mentioned I don't know if you're familiar enough or connected to the world still, but I think it was a big enough story where our boy Ravi Zacharias had a lot of skeletons in his closet.
Yeah, did you see all that?
I didn't go hard into it, but I remember peeping it.
Oh yeah, it was pretty bad. Really, it's
goodness.
It's one of those like. It's interesting that he was such a highly respected and well revered man, and dude, it's like a few years after he died is when like the shit hit the fan there, and it's like, oh fuck, that's what we've been supporting. That's a dark feeling when you realize when you support monsters like that. It makes you kind of.
So the last church that I was super involved with was Hillsong, New York.
Carl Lentz?
You guys, yeah. I mean, there's no way this is still his cell phone number, but I had his cell phone number. Like I didn't know him that well, but I met him and talked with him, and he like texted me once, and I was like, oh, my pastor is in the cell phone. But I had left Hillsong. I'll say I guess it was like 2.5 years ago now.
Okay, that's pretty recent
for a lot of different. Yeah. Man, I've been on a journey. But yeah, man, it was not surprising. But also just like not devastating for me, but I know I know how devastating it must be for so many people because you really put so much faith into these leaders who are telling you all these things, even when they're telling you not to put faith in them. The culture still kind of demands it. And also because people are trying to live at such a high moral level that feels impossible for most people to live by, like this moral code. And then when you're like, well, that person's doing it, and then you see that person isn't doing it, it's hard to not feel utterly betrayed,
Yeah, and they're just like also not doing it on a more extreme level than you've ever not done it in your life. It's like that's what's even worse.
Dude, right. It is like it's like
I was feeling guilty because I watched porn and you were out here like abusing people. Yeah. Carl didn't abuse people, just for the record, but or maybe he did. I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say that.
I don't remember the specifics. I think it was. I think it was affairs. I think there was allegations of like, it's tough. I mean, you're in a position of that much power. It's hard to not.
Right.
When do you cross that line into like a level of abuse versus consent?
That's a whole other.
Yeah. Right. Let's just unpack that.
Yes, that's true.
20 minutes.
Dude, these megachurch pastors are like 80s rock stars. They just got groupies that they're trying to bang.
Right. Oh my goodness. I know. And see the problem, and here's the thing. What's so funny is that, when I first started going to Hillsong, but my parents were cool with it, and for the most part, and most of the people I knew from my other church were cool with it. But I do remember like going to a service with some people that I knew from Times Square Church, and they were just like trashing it because it was in a nightclub, and they were like, why do they need to feel like, why does this need to be cool? And why were they playing instrumental secular music, during the forced fellowship, which is what they used to call it, and then they changed that name. Um, and I remember just thinking, like, why do you care about that? It was just it felt so surface level. And yet those people can turn around and be like, see, we were right. Like, that form of Christianity is wrong. You know what I mean? Even though things like this happen in all forms of Christianity with every denomination and every, but I think it's like that level of infighting amongst Christians and the feeling of superiority that certain denominations feel over others, like that in and of itself was one of the huge reasons that allowed me to kind of step back and be like, oh, just because like the church says something is right or wrong, like doesn't mean it actually is. And like, I think I'm going to start to separate who I think God is and what God is saying from like this ancient, I mean, like it's not even, the thing is that like the Christianity has gone through so many different levels and stages that we connect to it, but we don't actually. I mean, I don't know. I can go on and on about this. But.
No, I think you're right. Actually, I mean, you go on as long as you want. You don't that we can take this any direction because this is kind of what we do here. I think you are. It's like what we are connecting to is so growing up evangelical in mine. I mean, it was like your typical like white bread evangelicalism, and it's you're taught that you're connected to this, like conceptually to this thing that's been around for 2,000 years, and then you learn more and look around, and you're like, no, this is about 150 years old. What we're doing here, like it. In that, if being generous, given the way that it actually looks, like maybe belief wise, you can connect it back. But I mean, even the end, like all this like emphasis on the end times is fairly recent. And it just is like when you start realizing that you're not really you're connected to a concept that's been around for 2,000 years, but you're not connected in any way, shape, or form to how it all started.
No, not outside of like maybe some basic founding principles and that's not really what the church is built around. I think people say that's what the church is built around. Like people like to believe that that's what it's built around. But in reality, like, especially, I'll just talk about it from the view that I know, like American Christianity, specifically American evangelicalism, has way more to do with colonialism and white supremacy than it does like what Jesus was doing back in like ancient Rome, like there's so, and that's the other thing is that we never learn that stuff. We don't learn the history of Christianity really. Like we learn it maybe a little bit in school, but like the church never talks about it. And I guess like some people can go and study it if they wanted to, but no one thinks that you need to know that, right? Like a lot of people, especially, I mean, I don't know about all the Protestant religions, right? And it's funny because like even the term evangelical is something that was definitely not a negative connotation for me growing up, but it also wasn't like what we called ourselves because the church that I went to was non-denominational, right? And then they changed it to interdenominational at some point because they wanted to sound inclusive and not excluding. But it was evangelical, and I know people who are like Presbyterian who also have like what I feel like is evangelical spirit to them or whatever. So, and I know there's literally I once like was like, oh yeah, there's like 1,000, and then I looked it up on Google, and they were like, no, it's tens of thousands of denominations. It's like 10,000 denominations of Christianity,
and they all claim like the pedigree from the source, like we used to have like a series of lessons like once a year pretty much on like what was wrong with all these other denominations and why like ours was the way. And did your guys' churches get like a little angsty about being called Protestant?
No, they didn't really. No, I mean, I would say like that's the thing is like I didn't learn that much about the different denominations when I was growing up because our church was like our church both publicly was like, we're all Christian, it doesn't matter. And then also was like, but those Catholics.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it was still like, it wasn't like, like, if you ask them, like, hey, like, you know, people who are Catholic, are they going to heaven? They'd be like, hey, if they believe in Jesus, have a personal relationship with God, then like, yeah, absolutely. And then like, but then like every now and then they'd be like, but we don't do this and this and that. And honestly, people who do that are not reading the Bible and they're not looking at it. And I don't know, only God knows, but
they worship the Virgin Mary.
Right. Exactly.
It was like a big point.
Right.
It was like, we always laugh about how like the infant baptism was like such a hot topic when talking about Catholics, but then like every one of us got saved at like 5.
Yeah,
like it was any different.
Yeah, no. When you're 5 and you can speak, that's when you can make your own choice. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. It makes no sense. It's like, yeah, like a 6-year-old had any more choice than this baby did? No, you just taught it what to say. Of course, it's going to listen to you, parent who supplies it food and housing.
You have to be old enough to get your first burn so you can appreciate what hell is.
Yep.
You got to touch a hot pan before you can really get saved.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. And I also think about, I mean, I've talked about this with a lot of people who I know are doing the deconstruction thing. I think I've even just brought it up with my family of like the animosity that so many Protestants have towards Catholicism, while also being like, yeah, the Bible is the inerrant word of God, infallible. And it's like, cool, where did that Bible come from? It's from that same religion that you keep saying is like not the right way, right? And it was like all of Christianity for most of Christianity's lifetime was Catholicism. So like there wasn't even there was no other, it was like it branched off once and then that was it. Like, so I don't know. It's just an interesting thing when you think about it from a historical perspective, how new even just Protestantism is, and then how many times Protestants split, and it was immediate. Like
it was every
right when
time
it happened, they
different idea.
Just one thing. They're like, we baptize in water, and they're like, that's ungodly. Okay, we're out here.
We do a sprinkle.
Yeah,
submerging.
That's why mine got like,
just a dip.
That's why mine got like all upset about being called Protestant, because they're like, this isn't Protestantism. We didn't split from the Catholic Church. We returned to the original principles that Jesus set forth.
Oof.
There's a difference.
Of course.
That's bold.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what. What denomination did you?
We were like Baptist, but it was really like Southern Baptist. It was just
Southern Baptist
in Michigan.
Yeah. Mine was what you're talking about, that classic non-denominational, like
non-denominational. My dad listened to John MacArthur all the time. That was Calvinism. So I was aware of Calvinism, and like, goodness, I mean, talk about the height of hubris to be like, not only do you need to interpret the Bible correctly to live the right Christian life, but we're the only people who can do it, and everybody else does it wrong, and we'll explain to you why you're wrong. Our interpretation is the correct interpretation. I mean, yeah, it's.
And then you can't do anything about it because you're predestined to be wrong anyway. So let's just move on.
Yeah, predestined. God chose us to be right and chose you to be wrong.
Yeah. There was like a splinter group that my friend was a part of. He ended up leaving he's an atheist now, but his church didn't even believe in evangelism, because that was like trying to take God's will into your own hands. Like, people were either saved or they weren't, and there was nothing you could do about it. So just don't worry about evangelizing. Everybody that's important is in this church right here in this geographic location. Everyone else is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny about see, when I hear things like that, I'm like, yeah, I realize so many of these offshoots are just people like following the logical conclusion of like one point that they decided like is the main one, and they're like, because at a certain point it's like, yeah, if you are really into predetermination, then like I can make a logical argument that like, yeah, why are you evangelizing? That's you trying to affect God's will. God's will be done whether you do something or not, and so what's the point? I mean, I don't know. It's like there are so many things like that I don't know. It really how you are told to look at the Bible completely affects the way that you read it, and it affects what you pull from it, and the parts that you concentrate on, and the parts that you're like, well, that's not really what we're focused on, and you're like, why?
Yeah.
It's like no, because this part supersedes that part. And it was like, well, what if I say that part supersedes this part?
Oh,
I remember
that's where
when,
the predestination thing goes every time. It's like,
Yeah.
if we're going to go one way or the other here, you got to explain away a lot of scripture verses. And that's when people
Yeah.
start going, well, if you look at the original Greek translation of this word, it can mean these 6 different things. And I think in this context, this one that backs up my point is probably the correct pronunciation.
Yeah. It would have to be.
There's also one that was like, well, it talks about this 5 times, but talks about this about 20. So, I mean, 20 outweighs 5. So obviously we just go with that. That's the only way to,
right.
It's just more.
Right.
I guess
And
that's
it's
the
like,
right
well,
way to do it.
didn't Paul write that 16 times? So it's like, yeah. And God let him. So
whenever you get backed into a corner, you always just be like, look, maybe our imperfect human reasoning just can't make sense of this.
Yeah.
And we'll have to wait on God to explain it to us someday in eternity. Until then, let's just assume I'm right.
Yeah, amazing. I remember, I think I had a John MacArthur Bible at one point, and he had all these footnotes, and it felt like a Bible that was like dedicated to like making the assertion that the Bible is infallible. There are no errors. There's no contradictions, and so like everything that is contradictory, and like he would have some footnote about it. And the thing always sticks out of my mind was like the different tellings of certain stories in the gospel. Say obviously the same story, but like the number of people differ, and then like he would be like, well, clearly like. This person is only talking about the leader, the person who spoke for this group of people. And so they didn't need, that's why there was only 2. But in actuality, there were 3, but the 2 spoke. And that's why this one says 2 and that one says 3, but it's the same. And I was like, what?
Yeah, dude. That's the funniest thing about like this whole idea that like the Bible is completely infallible, 100% true as it says. It's as it says it is in the scripture. Because like
right.
in no other context would you argue about that.
It doesn't. Yeah. And I'm like, it doesn't even say like because it said. I mean, there's a part in Revelations that talks about, but I'm like, who is the Revelations isn't talking about the entirety of the scripture. It's talking about the book that we assume John wrote, right? Like it's this part. It's not every part. And then they're like, well, no, there's all these things like the Bible is used for like discipline, correction. I'm forgetting the exact verse, but I'm like, there really isn't. There's not like any time where Jesus is like every single like the FYI about 60 years from now, a bunch of gospels and some letters from Paul are going to be written about me, and everything that they write, all of it infallible. I told them to write every single word. Take it as a 100% truth with no errors. Yep, everything Paul said was dictated by God himself. I don't know. It's just
by the time John got to writing Revelation, like I think he had Alzheimer's or something, because that book's wild. Like that's the one that you could leave
some
out.
dreams, man.
The wake up call for me was like what you were talking about. Like you mentioned John MacArthur in his Bible. It's like every single page, it's an explanation of why this doesn't actually contradict. And you're like, you get to a point where like, dude, if you have to work this hard to try to tell me that on every single page that this is why it doesn't look the way it looks, it's getting pretty hard to believe that it is what you say it is.
Dude, what's funny to me is like thinking back on some of the times that, like you're saying, like everybody picks a different thing that becomes the cornerstone of their belief system and why they're better than everybody else. And then like individually people pick up on like little bitty things that they make a big deal out of, like explaining to you.
Right.
Like sometimes it's like a gospel related thing, but then I remember at Liberty, there was this awful girl that was in my sister dorm that April hung out with when I first met her. And she like gave us this like fiery explanation one time of how like all anal sex is sodomy. We're just like, okay, like I don't know what you want me to do with that. Like I've never even kissed a girl before.
But that doesn't mean you haven't had anal sex, Casey, because you don't, at Liberty, you can get there before kissing. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Not
I mean,
physically.
it's funny because it's like, that's, and also when I found out that like there were people who were like having anal sex to like say that they were still virgins, that also is like that level of like, we're trying to, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just
loophole.
Yeah.
it's truly wild. It's like it's honestly like how I feel about, when you're like actually trying to define race and then somebody like me pops up and it's like, well, my mom is white and my dad is black, so what is that? Like at a certain point you start to go like, yeah, none of this doesn't make any sense, does it? We're trying to create lines and draw these boxes that it doesn't, we don't know what we're doing. we're just yeah, like I just looked this up because I remember I used to have arguments all the time with people, and then when I was doing some deconstruction, I was like having arguments in the opposite direction. But like the whole like the inerrancy of the Bible, like the scripture that people I think cite the most is 2 Timothy 3:16, which says all scripture is breathed out of God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. Nothing there says that it's infallible. You know what I mean? Like even if you take that like literal word for word value, like God wrote that, like that's still not saying that, there aren't any errors here. I don't know. Like there's just even when people are taking the Bible so literally, even after reading like 2 different creation stories, like right off the bat and going like, well, wait a minute, like what this story and that story are different. So what's going on here? And being like, oh, maybe it doesn't actually matter. Like that's not the point. The point isn't for you to like look at this and, try to draw some scientific conclusions from it. I don't know. People are, it's strange, man. But I think for me, it's all about people wanting certainty, right? And so many people they want to feel like they're safe, secure, they know what's happening. And so, it's, for me, it's like faith isn't enough. They're like, no, I need to like logically prove, because we live in the, quote unquote age of reason, that like everything that I believe is 100% also accurate. And I can like back it up with all these like science facts and blah, 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 blah. And then, I don't know.
Yeah.
Leads people down weird places.
Yeah, it's like that way in so many different instances in people's lives. The same way in politics. I mean, like hang around somebody who's like a through and through libertarian for a couple days, and like before you choke them out, like they're explaining to you why like they don't have to get a driver's license, or that like the way to fix the education system is like to disband the like the Department of Education completely and have no rules or guidelines.
Right. I know. Yes. Libertarianism is such an ideological political philosophy where I every time I talk, it's like, there are times where I'll talk to some of my friends who are libertarian and I'm like, look, there are some things you're saying that I'm like, yeah, that could be nice, but like, this is not the world we live in. Like, you live in a fake world that never existed. It didn't exist at the beginning of America, and it certainly doesn't exist now. Like, there was never a time where all these principles you're talking about actually were there. Even in the heyday of the Constitution, there was at least 20% of the population that had zero rights. So they were considered property. So if you... But like it's so then it's automatically you're like your libertarian views are gone, right? Like it was controlled. Like, yeah, it's easy to say that like, no, the government's not in my hair. I mean, they're in those people's hair, but it's not in my hair, so like that counts. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's automatically discounted.
Libertarianism is political Calvinism.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's everywhere too. And like it's in the Democratic Party, it's in the Republican Party, it's in all the offshoots of those parties too. Like anytime people are trying to like clamp down on just kind of one way, and don't allow for the gray and the like complexities of life to seep in, you're always going to get this kind of, whatever dogma.
Yeah, for sure. So, man,
Close-mindedness. Yeah.
You mentioned leaving like Hillsong about 2.5 years ago, and was that and it sounds like you've been going down this big road that a lot of us are on as well, like of a big reevaluation. So did that start about 2.5 years ago? This kind of reevaluation.
No, I mean it started like I would say 2013 is when this started for me. Like, and I kind of very quickly I flirted with atheism for a bit. I listened to atheist podcasts, and that honestly was mostly because of I just felt like I couldn't live a sexually pure life, and I wasn't having sex, but I was making out with girls and things and then not doing it, and then it's so funny, I'm so used to saying I was addicted to porn, but that is such a, if I wasn't Christian, there was no way in hell I would say that I was addicted to porn, because there are people who are actually addicted to porn who are watching it 5 times a day. Like I saw the movie Don John. I was like, oh, that's a porn addiction.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I wasn't even close. I just watched porn 4 times in 6 months, and I was like, I can't quit. I need a nicotine patch. But it was really that, and that paired with the church's views on the LGBTQ community. I had so many friends. I mean, I had a gay friend in high school. Really, I actually had more than one gay friend. I just didn't know because people weren't out. And then when I got to college, my roommate was gay, and then in the acting world, I just knew so many people from that community that more and more I was like, this is not squaring up. This doesn't feel right. And then that coupled with my own feelings about I can't keep my own sexuality in check, and how do I, and this feels impossible, and it felt so cruel. That's what I was kind of I was ruminating on. I was like, why would God set up certain people to have such hardships with this? And then I look at pastors who got married at 21, and they're trying to relate, and I'm like, screw you, you got married at 21,
yeah,
you can't sit here and tell a group of 30 I wasn't 32 at the time, but you know what I mean, there are people who are there 35, aren't married, and you're telling them they're wrong for wanting to have any sexual connection to other people, or God forbid they're gay, and they're you'll never have that kind of, you'll never have love with somebody who you're sexually attracted to ever in your entire life. And you just have to, and that's just the thorn in your side. That's the thorn that God gave you, and you have to live with.
Your cross to bear.
That's your cross to bear. So it was kind of that stuff that started making me question everything. But I very quickly was but I so strongly felt God is real, and the principles of Christianity in terms of love your neighbor as yourself, and the idea of forgiveness and compassion and reconciliation and redemption, all of that stuff I still believed in and felt so strongly was a part of life, and so and I did believe in a higher power and all this stuff. So that's kind of what kept me in. But then Hillsong was a new birth, because it was when I first started going to Hillsong, I didn't really care about the coolness of the church. Was actually the annoying part. It was more other than the fact that there were a lot of young attractive people who went there, that I liked, but yeah. but it was the rock music I didn't care. I was I like gospel. I don't like Christian rock that much. I grew to like some songs, but I was just this is not why I'm here. I'm here because Carl, who I really did like, would like come on stage and be like, none of us are perfect, just like, you don't need to like be living some sort of perfect life for God to like use you and do other things. And the focus was more on helping other people and less about like, even though the focus in the church was they would always do an altar call, it was very evangelical. It felt like the messages were more about just helping others and like not trying to weigh yourself down with guilt, and then the Hurricane Sandy happened when I was there, and so we helped people a lot in the Rockaways and stuff like that. So that was like kind of giving me new life. But then I was also like kind of doing my own deconstruction. So Hillsong was kind of a part of that, because Times Square Church, I felt, at least for me, was so intent on looking at yourself and like all the sin that you're doing and like how you're not living righteously and this and that. And I was so focused on myself. It just felt like such a selfish version of Christianity. And so Hillsong felt less selfish. And then like, then I started dating, who is now my wife, Tessa. And she was very spiritual, but didn't have any practice in Christianity at all. And so she was, even just being in a relationship with her was what I was told not to do my entire life. Of
you were unequally yoked, my friend.
Can't be unequally yoked, and then breaking down that verse and being like, what does this mean? And like, oh, I did actually never, I've heard that term the whole time. Like I said that, and she was like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I actually have no idea. Oh, it's about oxen? Like what? It's about some freaking board that like takes two oxen, and when they're plowing a field, like, and one is weaker and the other is stronger, like it's not good for the plow, like, which is like an interesting
sexual metaphor,
antiquated image. That I was like, I kind of looked at it and I was like, well, this, I don't know, I interpreted it differently, and so I told my parents, and they were kind of like, we trust you. And I was like, oh, that was surprising. And so
they didn't say, are you sure that's what God wants for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did. They 100% did that. My dad pulled the old
Power Rangers jacket,
tosses up to his old tricks.
You got the old tricks out, but like, I prayed through it, and so that was a part of it. I read this book by Ken Wilber called A Brief History of Everything, and that was a huge thing. If you haven't read it or heard of it, I recommend checking it out. He has this philosophy that is essentially like talking about, he talks about this thing called holarchy, just like this is what everything is, and there's an infinite, everything consists of smaller parts and larger, and is a part of something larger infinitely in both directions, and that's and like kind of says like, yeah, and some people call this God. And there was a way in which he like described everything that was like, that makes a lot of sense, and still felt connected to a lot of the things that I was taught, through Christianity. So it was like, and then I also found the podcast, that what's it, the Liturgist. You guys know that one?
Yep. Yeah.
So that was a huge, yeah, it's great. That was a huge part of it. And I had, one of my best friends, Wes, who was kind of going through the same thing, and and then more and more realize, oh, there are other people going through, like the Liturgist podcast helped me realize that. And then, yeah, I think like opening up and realizing that there are so many of us who feel the same way, and we're like going through the same things and having the same questions. And, and I think a lot of people go different directions with it. For me, I've been able to keep a semblance. I still, like, if somebody were to say to me, are you a Christian? I would still say yes. I just like am not subscribed to the same kind of Christianity that I was before. And I don't, and I'm not, and at first was like interested in like helping to reform it, I guess, and then realized that that's already a denomination.
Yep.
So it was like, you know what? Like, maybe we should stop this whole denomination thing and like just be like, look, you can be whatever denomination you want. And at the end of the day, I really do feel like God is working things out with everybody in their own way. And I'm not overly concerned with other people's lives, especially people who I don't know, which is another thing about Christian culture that bothers me so much, is like how much people care about people that they have zero investment in, like, and no personal connection to. And and that definitely reflects on a political scale as well, where you're just like,
Certainly.
is this really about you? Like, is this really about God? Like, it feels like it's just about you combating your own, because you don't want anything to question your own, identity or your own belief system. So you attack other people so that you can like prop up your own belief system. That's how I feel about things sometimes.
Well, it's
Yeah.
funny how like church, like such a big part of it is the community aspect of it. I mean, that's the only reason that that you would go to a church for the most part, is like, yeah, you're here to listen to sermons and stuff like that, but you're really there to like hang out with like-minded people. And I think back on like how little time we spent talking about like how to have like beneficial, like good relationships with other people. Like we spent no time talking about like what it means to like be somebody's friend,
Right.
and consequently, like when we started disagreeing, all of our friendships fell apart, because it's just everybody is so focused on like, well, if we don't agree on this, I mean, this is a cornerstone of my, not just my political or religious beliefs, but like my identity. And I just don't see how there's room for you in my life if you don't agree on this thing,
Yeah, it's funny. John, I'm similar to you in that I still call myself a Christian. I still go to a church too, and I think what made me feel fine, like I had moved from one to another and had a bad experience at one, and that's where that was kind of like that's where a major shift started taking place in me. This is probably 8-ish years ago, but finding a place, so Casey, one of the things you said is like even being around like-minded people, and I think what I finally felt in a good place was when I found the only thing that was like-minded was that people were interested in having conversations even if they disagreed, and finding that space to me was a big deal, where you could have all of those conversations. I mean, I know some people who still go, they'll just show up from time to not we've done anything since the pandemic really, but people who would show up who don't, they're like, I don't even call them, like, they don't call themselves Christian anymore, but they still found like a kind of a family there, where it's just like, they know that everyone there accepts them for who they are. And it's not about like because I used to have this feeling of like, I need to be friends with all these people. And like, that's what this idea that community is like build friendship. And I'm like, I just get something out of being there with people. And I might see them once or twice a month and have interesting conversations, but there's still a connection, and there's like just a genuine conversation happening, and there's no expectation that anybody lands in one place or another. And that was really meaningful to me when I found that. And it still is. I still appreciate that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. We like, Tessa and I were like going to this church in Brooklyn that is actually I think is Presbyterian, but like, flies like a Black Lives Matter and rainbow flag outside of their building, and they're like what I guess is termed now as a progressive Christian church, and with like a very social justice or like bent to the messages, and that has been nice to see. And also I think what you're saying is true, like so much what both you're saying is true, like the church is like it's about the community, and it's about the like-mindedness. One of the things I liked about Hillsong, but then I felt like one of the reasons I left is because I felt like they weren't really doing this much, was when I first was there, I felt like they were getting people connected, getting people who didn't go to church, or maybe they grew up in church a little and they left and they were coming back, and then there were people who like didn't really go to church and they were coming in, and they made everybody feel like home at home, but like, and then I realized like Hillsong was just building its own community, and like outside of like certain things here and there, all this manpower was just going to like making the church bigger, as opposed to like, kind of organizing us to go out and like do good within the city. Like, God knows there's so many things that they could help. And like, instead, like people are, volunteering, 8, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a week, just hosting more church, and it's like,
Yeah.
all right, now we have 4 services on Sunday, and we have a service on Tuesday, and a prayer meeting on Wednesday, and a youth night on Friday, and this thing on Thursday, and like we need volunteers to serve at all those things, and then we have small groups, and make sure you go to those, and like this and that, and it's like, that's all well and good, but then and they're like, then there's a conference, and like we're doing this conference, and it's in order to do the conference, we're going to need like 100 volunteers to do the conference, and then we have another conference, and at this conference they're promoting the next conference, and it's just like, what? I was like, at a certain point, I'm like, couldn't some of this attention, instead of just but then I realized that's what evangelicalism, that's how I've been defining it now. Because at first I was like, what does this even mean? To me, it just means when your sole focus, your sole belief system is just getting other people to say the sinner's prayer, just essentially what it is. Like, as long as we get them to the church, and then at the end of the church service, they'll say the sinner's prayer, and they become Christian, they become saved, they get saved, they convert, then we've done our job and nothing else matters. And if that's really what you believe, which I think is truly what a lot of people believe, and again, if my parents are listening to this, probably like, oh my God, John, do you not believe that? Like if that's what you believe, then like, of course, like all that other stuff is like, yeah, it's nice, but you don't need to. And I kind of have heard people say that to a certain extent of like, you'll be like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. Like all these people are dying over here, or like the immigrants at the border, or like all these like trans kids are dying, or whatever, like the thing, like all the world problems that are happening. They're like, yeah, that's sad, but like at the end of the day, all that matters is, are they saved? And like Jesus is going to come back, and the rapture is going to happen. So like we kind of don't need to do anything really. Like all that stuff is nice, if God tells you to do it, then you should. But otherwise, it's better to just make sure that you get people to come to church. Like just ask them if they know God, and can they come to church on Sunday? And if that is your main, if that's your main focus, and that is what what so much of Christian focus is, then it's like, no wonder we live in a world that like, if the belief system is as effective as it should be, how can like 35% of the world profess themselves Christian, and like this much horrible things are still happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense. 70% of this nation considers themselves Christian, and it's this clearly one of the greediest nations like on the planet. Like this country runs on greed, and like meanwhile, like 70% of its population is like, oh yeah, we believe in God, and the money is the root of all evil because it says so in the Bible, and yet,
yeah,
not really. As
well,
long as they said the sinner's prayer, so it's fine.
It's like a hierarchy of convenience, because it's just like with when it comes to politics, like abortion is such a useful tool in politics, because like whatever happens with all of this other stuff, at the end of the day, are we killing babies? Okay, well, like I have to vote over here, and I don't have to really think about that, because this trumps that 100% of the time. Like people's bodily needs aren't really that big of a deal, because ultimately it's their eternal destination that trumps all of that,
Right.
And that's putting it like in the least charitable way possible. Like, I mean, that's a really douchey way to summarize everyone's belief, but it's something that you see, like, I think sometimes subconsciously play out. Like, well, this is my focus. It's really to support these missionaries and get them out there and stuff. And I don't really need to get involved in the community,
Here's the thing. I don't think it's that. Here's the thing. Like you're 100% right in that, especially when you're thinking about politics, it is no coincidence that the like top, religious, political, issues are abortion and gay marriage, right? And it's still gay marriage somehow. Like, and it's like, oh, the things that like don't like a lot of you don't have to think about or worry about, and or even some of you do, but like you did it once and then you haven't done it anymore. And so like you could be like, no, it is wrong. And like, God forgives me for doing it, or God forgives my sister or my aunt or my mom who had to do it at one point, but it's okay. we still think it's wrong, and they know it's wrong now. So, and it's like, yeah, it's so easy for you. It's so easy to concentrate on that instead of like all the other things that Jesus was actually talking about. It's Jesus like wasn't mentioning that stuff at all. But all the stuff about helping the poor and housing the homeless and feeding the hungry, and you look at the numbers of America and people are like, yeah, but there's really nothing we could do about that. It's like, oh, okay, so you can forcibly make sure that two people who love each other can't get married, but the act of just like giving some more tax dollars to house some people that are homeless, you can't do that. Like, I don't know. You're right. It's like it's politics of convenience, and that's the thing. And that's when the world sees the hypocrisy of people who claim to be Christian living these certain lives. It's like, of course, it has the reputation that it does. How can it not? And the sad part is that so many Christians also believe that and are like yesing, and even saying it from the pulpit, and yet still doing the same thing. Like, it's like nobody thinks it's them. Everybody thinks it's somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. It's funny. I remember you probably heard the same thing. It's like when you talk about healthcare problems, homeless, like trying to like reallocate tax dollars to these social ills. The church is responsible. Like, well, that's not the government's job. That's the church's job. Right. And then you're like, well, the church isn't doing it. So the solution to it is the government should tax the churches and then only use that money to do the things that the church is supposed to do. And they don't have their loophole anymore. I'm all about that.
Dude, I'm all for it. Like, I keep thinking about that. Like, if a church is actually like being of service to their local community, and they're taking all of those offerings and then putting them to work with their local community, like, by all means, go ahead. People paid taxes on all their income and then they chose to give it to, whatever, that's fine. But like, yeah, when all of it is going towards like lobbying for specific legislation or, just all of the ridiculous things that have no impact locally. Well, I don't think you should.
Or just their own pastors' pockets, or their staff, or buying a new church. This is what I'm saying. Like, then that goes back to that thing that I was saying before. Like, but if your like ideology is just like, well, all we really are supposed to do is tell other people about Jesus and get them to be saved, and so you don't have to do any of these other things that God like specifically asked you to do. You can just point to the one verse that says, go spread the gospel, and be like, see, that's the one that matters. All the other ones that don't really matter. And that's why our rec center needs to be built, because it will get more people to come in. That's why we need, and then we'll send missionaries to places that have already heard about Jesus, and we'll pretend like they haven't. And, we'll like raise a bunch of money so that a bunch of white people can like go on a nice exotic trip and feel like they did something, and then come back and be like, I learned something. And it's like, yeah, you did learn something. You learned that nobody needed you over there. And if you wanted to help those people, you could have just gave money to the local organizations there instead of spending all this money flying on a plane that's destroying our environment.
But they didn't lose their photo op with the black kid, so we can't.
Yeah.
I love it. They would always like get on stage at the end and be like, in a way, I feel like I got more out of it than even the local kids did. It's like, I bet.
Yeah,
it was always the kids that like, dude, the ones that always drove me crazy, because I always like worked when I was a kid, and it always cracked me up how like the kids that always went on the missions trips like every year were the ones that didn't work, and they would have to like raise money from the church. Like they would ask for offerings and stuff, people to sponsor them for their trip to Guatemala or Costa Rica or whatever.
I did it.
I did that. I wrote a letter to family members and other church members so that I could go to Israel.
How many souls did you win?
I got to go to Israel. I didn't win any souls.
Dude, you and Sam are tied.
vacation for me.
Yep.
And I'm so happy that people did that and I was able to go because there's no way I was going to pay for a trip to Israel by myself. But like, what?
Yeah.
Come on.
My missions trip was to Jamaica, and we stayed on like the beach.
Oh my God.
It was like it wasn't a resort. It was like it wasn't a nice place, but it was like you didn't have to be nice on the inside. You'd sleep in there, and then you just like chill out on the beach, nice grassy area, super private, gated.
Your mission trip at the Wyndham.
We did a VBS at a church in the area. A VBS because only.
Did you do like one day of like hard labor?
We never did hard labor. We went to an orphanage one day. One day. The rest of the days it was VBS, and because they needed, I think it was they needed high school white kids to run that VBS for some reason. I can't remember why.
Of course.
It was really.
Who else could teach?
Who else would be qualified?
I know. I mean, you don't get more qualified than being a white high school kid taking a plane to Jamaica, so that way you can. I mean, the VBS was all like mostly little kids, and they're just
I am a C. I am a CH. That's what all you were doing. You're teaching the kids those songs.
And you're like an anomaly.
I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Come on.
I
remember they showed that. I think they played that song. Like that was one of like the songs that they played in like the trailer of Jesus Camp. And I remember like friends from my college would be like, "Oh my goodness, did you see that?" And I was like, "I sing that song, baby."
I may never march in the infantry. Dude, we need to have like a VBS sing along and just rehash all of the horrible old songs. Like, did you guys sing that one about obedience? It was like, obedience is the very best way to show that you believe.
No,
that was a good one.
That I haven't heard. That's maybe amazing.
That was a holistic Baptist song, maybe.
Got it.
Oh my God, man!
But yeah,
John, thanks so much for hanging. This has been an absolute blast. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and this has been a good time. So
yeah, it's totally worth the phone call I'm going to get from my parents in approximately 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah. That's about when this will come out.
Some people's parents just ignore that it exists, I mean.
Yeah, no, that is. I mean, yeah. This is what my mom will do. My mom will be like, "I heard the podcast," and I'll be like, "Cool," and then she'll be like, "All right," and now she's gonna be like, "I heard you say, I heard the podcast."
She'd be like, "Are you still addicted to porn?"
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm married now. Everything's okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, man. And do you have some things you want to shout out? Tell people what you're up to right now.
Sure. I mean, if you like listening to podcasts, if you like movies, I host a movie podcast called Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood. It's on Apple, Spotify, where you get your podcasts. We just talk about movies of leading Black actors in the context of race and diversity in Hollywood. But it's also funny because we're all funny people. So it's not like going to just shame you for being white. And then I know people are concerned about that. I heard people going, uh-oh. And then you can follow me at John Braylock on Twitter and Instagram. Oh, and if you haven't seen, there's no way you have. I have a sketch show called Astronomy Club, the sketch show on Netflix. So you could check that out. It's a fun show.
Which is fantastic, by the way. I watched the entire thing straight through and thought it was hilarious. And then
Thank you.
2 days later, I had a friend come over and we were talking. He hadn't seen it, and we just sat down and watched the whole thing straight through, and I laughed just as hard the second time. So,
dude, the skit where it was like rehab for magical Black people in movies.
Oh yeah.
And there's like the lady in the wheelchair or something. She's like, "Isn't anybody gonna heal me?" And they're like, "Not today."
You have that your resting creek face sketch killed me.
Yes, thank you.
It's good. I was dead, man. I could.
Yes.
So yeah, everyone definitely check out that show. It's fantastic. If you watched it and don't laugh, then you're the problem.
I love it. Gotta laugh at one. I mean, there's at least one sketch in there for you to laugh at.
I'll be honest. There were times where I was watching it. And I'm like, I don't know if this one's. I don't know if
one's
this
not
is for me. I don't.
Yeah.
To
be honest, I felt the same way. There were certain sketches I was like, I don't know why other people think this is funny, but one of my group members does, and here it is.
I mean,
other people are like, that's my favorite sketch.
Yeah. No, I'm like, some of this, I'm like, this seems like it's like going, it seems like I'm too much the wrong, like, I guess, culture. I'm too white.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think that wasn't for white people. Like
for sure. Oh yeah. There were definitely some like that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like me trying to show my dad a Tim and Eric video.
Yeah.
And I'm just like giggling, and he's like, I don't understand. So he just sits on people's laps. Like, I don't get
it. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, guys, thanks for listening, and we will check you next time.